So I'm going to say, you know, in most examples, what I'm doing is putting out a cover. That cover could be pasta frontale, bush. It could be a push, pasta breve, bush. It could be a counter cut. We're cutting at each other, and and basically I'm going to conclude with, you find it how you find it. Hi, I'm Mucky with the Exiles. Hope you're safe and well. I've totally jinxed the weather today. It is summer, but I put on shorts and of course it's raining. I'm joined by John again behind the mask from Barking Exiles, and today we're going to quickly look at some setup options for getting into the first and second plays of Gioco Largo. We've probably got more videos on the channel around these two plays than anything else, including a half-an-hour deep dive I did earlier in the year where there's a lot more detail around setups, angles, where you're meeting on the blade and why, and so on and so forth. And I'll link that video underneath. Today, all we're interested in, there's a couple of different ways to access these principles, okay? We call them principles, and as we'll explore very briefly, you need to look at them as a set of principles. Okay, so in the manuscript we see an image like this, okay? I'm the person doing the play. So my left foot is forward because I'm staying wide and loose. I'm staying at Gioco Largo. John has sent in a cut, although as we discussed, that could be a number of things he's attacked me with. And we've met down on the punta, okay? We've met down on the ends of the weapon. Now the important thing about where we're meeting is that that's where the swords initially come together. Because you'll notice if John extends his arms, oh, stay where you were, go back. If John extends his arms, he's still just a little bit outside of distance, okay? Which means although we've met here, he actually wasn't close enough to hit me. If he steps in a little bit more, okay, we've still met up high, but now he's in distance to hit me, okay? The reason why I mention that is because what normally happens, and where we get a lot of questions, is the fact that, yes, initially the weapons will meet down on the punta, but they will slide down themselves, okay? Because as the arcs of our cuts, or whatever action we're doing, the arcs progress, because we're in distance enough to hit each other, or certainly John wants to hit me, the distance dictates the fact that we will continue down each other's weapon until we sort of start to get towards the middle. We had a question around something that I talk about quite a lot, which is something being distance driven, okay? I often sort of say distance is driven as one of the sort of primary indicators as to actions, okay? I often say this action is open because it's distance driven. And the question was around, what do I mean when I say that, okay? So we'll talk about that now. Okay, I'll show you what I mean. So we're here, we will meet, but because John wants to hit me, look, we will extend, okay? And that's why in most of our videos you'll tend to see the contact happen high, but they'll start to slide down each other, okay? Now there's more detail in previous videos about that, so I'm not going to go on about that too much, but this is where we have to be really careful, okay? There are some instances where you will play around punta to punta. Yeah, let's say that we've got sharps and we are just a bit tentative and we're just moving, we're just a bit tentative, and yes, absolutely from here I can do those plays, absolutely I can do those plays. But if John's committed and he's trying to actually strike at me, okay, then he wants to hit me. So what will happen is this, okay? Yes, we initially met here, but the weapon's carried on, okay? That's a really important principle to remember. Certainly if you're new to Fiore and you're looking at these two plays, you have to understand the context of what's going on with the evolution of these actions, okay? It's not always exactly as the image, okay? The image is important and it's telling us a lot, but you have to play things out, all right? What we tend to do with new students is we start them on the right shoulder. At this point, they may just be getting familiar with posture and the basics of moving a weapon and so on and so forth. We tend to start them on the right shoulder, and we tend to make this action a sort of countercut into a very sort of a loose pasta frontale. The reason why we do that as an initial action into these plays is because it's giving them an appreciation of angles, distance, dominating a line, and about 100 other things, okay? But this evolves. I'll show you the entry first. So initially what we're looking at is just cutting out here into this space. Effectively, this is just a cover, okay? It could be a little bit high, could be a little bit low, and that's it, that's the entry. So we'll do the cover, and if my point is on, I'll thrust, and if my point is not on, but John's is, then I will cut around, okay? And the reason why I have to cut around is because if I thrust, I'm thrusting at nothing, okay? So if he's got the centre line, I don't, I cut around, okay? We can all agree on that. So remember principles, okay? So these, and this is something we say a lot, these actions can manifest themselves in lots of different ways, okay? The important thing to remember, if we just go back to the first example, the one that we normally teach, okay, is its principles, okay? I'm thrusting if the line is open. Sometimes I'm forcing that if I can, but you see there it's difficult, you know, you have to really work at that. And if John has his centre line on, I can't thrust anymore, okay? So I cut around. Now before we do these actions, I'm just going to talk about the cut around real quick. There's loads of different ways to do the cut around, okay? And some of this is preference. I think I've talked again in previous videos about this being preference. Most people will meet out here and they will, you know, if the point is, their point is offset and there's a risk that John can thrust at me and I've got nothing to thrust at, most people will push the weapon aside like this. They will use their quillon, their cross guard, to clear the line before they come straight back down the line, okay? That's absolutely fine. Some people in the group will do it more of an actual cut around. So they will, again, not have anything to thrust on, they will do an actual full-on cut around, okay? Almost like a moulinet off the right shoulder, which in this particular instance is quite a fast action. And then there's other options too. What I tend to do is, as the points start drifting, as that thrust becomes a risk, I tend to lift like this up high, and I tend to cut fendente, but I'm bringing that onto my left shoulder so that I can recover to the right side. So the point is, Fiore doesn't tell us how to do that cut around, he just says to turn the sword. So there's lots of different ways to do it. So let's look at a couple of different entries into this play, okay? We've got that kind of classic thrower cover out there. You could make that a very strict posta frontale, okay? So like this, that's absolutely fine. Some clubs exclusively just do this action from this posta. I think that's a bit limiting, but it's perfectly legitimate. There's my thrust, and if he's got the centre line, there's my cut around, okay? I can also do this as a more aggressive counter cut at their actual weapon. Instead of just throwing out a cover, I can cut down onto the weapon to get the centre. Okay, so I can cut down at their weapon. Still staying largo, little crease of the front foot just to open them up, as I've previously explained, but I'm here. Okay, I can use a bit of a twist of the body, I can extend my arms a little bit if I want to, but effectively I'm driving that point in to their centre, okay? And if he displaces that, then I've got the cut around, okay? We can also do this action if we're both just cutting at each other. So we're just moving, operating, you know, we've thrown some cuts, we've done some we've moved around a little bit, and we both just cut. Now, yes, I've come forward with my right foot, and yes, we're very deep on the weapon, but the principle is the same. I've got the space to do the thrust because I can see the opening. I'm good with distance, so I know that the thrust is on, so I send a thrust in. And if he's got the centre line, well, that's fine, I'll step and I'll just cut around. Another option is just to do it from posta breve, okay? So maybe I'll start low, maybe John will cut. Look, I'm up here, that's fine. I'm perfectly safe from this with my posta breve. This is obviously a great position to thrust from. And again, if John's taken the centre because he was faster than me, set off before me, he was harder with his cut, or he's just come across my body, well then I'll just cut around, okay? Another example is to find this as a secondary action, okay? So let's say I'm in a posta dentro di cingale and I send in a thrust, okay? Bringing my left foot forward. John has covered my thrust exactly as he should, or one of the ways he can, okay? And my weapon is now spent, okay? I can't hit anything on the end of this. It would be pretty challenging for me to cut around because look where his point is. So if I start the cut around here, you know, there's a risk, there's a huge risk there. Okay, so instead what am I going to do? I'm going to recover. There's the recovery, John's followed me, there's the thrust. Because the line was open. So that's what I'm going to do, I'm going to thrust straight back down the line. And if we set that up again and the line isn't open, so I thrust, John's put it aside, I've got nowhere to go, so one of my options is to start a recovery. John's taken the centre, I know he can thrust now. There you go, there's the put aside, there's the cut down the line. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of ways to set up what we're seeing in these two plays, and that's why we call them a principle. And as our levels progress, we are teaching those layers. We're building this up into a set of principles. You're moving, you're operating. I haven't got a mask on, so we'll be careful, but we might just have found it down on the end. Look, that's okay, there's a thrust. Okay, I mean, he's going to be an idiot to let me land it. Cover it. Okay, fine, there's a cut, yeah? I think one of the reasons, just to touch on briefly, why it's sometimes initially a bit of a challenge to find these plays very cleanly is when you are looking at the typical distances that we all started off sparring at. Okay, we're all generally too far away. It's very hard to find these plays cleanly when you're too far away. If you're at typical sort of sparring distance where you kind of lunge in and you sort of throw, you're not really going to find these plays very cleanly. It's going to be a bit car crash. So my biggest advice to kind of mitigate some of that is, one, tighten up the distance a little bit, okay? And two, take a line, okay? So tightening up the distance a little bit and taking a line, okay? Because it will be more realistic and it will be a lot cleaner in action, okay? So that's that. I hope it was useful, and until the next one.
Not the only way. Yeah, okay, so it's going to be playing about at the point.
Yep.
Then frontally.
Yeah, so we'll do right here, we'll just mess in, yeah. I sound a bit posh, we're in. Or here, I'm at risk, I'm in, yeah. Yep. Then it's going to be, I'm going to actually countercut out the weapon. Yeah.
Then countercut at me.
Then I'm going to countercut, that's too deep.
I'll go high as well.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, I'm right foot forward, but fuck it, it's still there. It's still there. It's a principle.
Yeah. Then.
Oh, and then the thrust.
Breve.
So, and then Breve. Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah,
Bosh.
There we go.
Yeah.
And then no, sorry, you throw a thrust.
Oh, I do thrust.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll set it. Then you take it back, covered, and there you are.
Bosh. Okay, that works.